The galactic war between Earth and the Confederation of Zorith had been waged for over a decade, leaving both sides battered but unwilling to surrender. Humanity, resilient and adaptive, had fought tooth and nail against the superior numbers and advanced technology of the Zorathians. Yet despite their relentless push forward, Earth's forces knew they were approaching a breaking point. It was then that the Zorathians made their move. A diplomatic envoy from the Confederation arrived at the Human War Council under a white flag. Their leader, High Chancellor Vyrox, stood tall with an air of quiet arrogance as he addressed Earth's military commanders. "We recognize the determination of your species," Vyrox said, his reptilian features barely concealing his distaste. "And in the spirit of ending unnecessary bloodshed, we offer you a gift. A weapon unlike any you have wielded before. A tool of power that could bring a swift and decisive end to this war." The room fell silent. No one trusted the Zorathians, not after years of bloodshed and deceit. But the promise of a weapon powerful enough to turn the tide was impossible to ignore. General Alex Grayson, Earth's Supreme Commander, narrowed his eyes. "And what do you ask in return?" "Only peace," Vyrox answered smoothly. "A ceasefire. You take this weapon, test it, and if it proves effective, we negotiate an armistice." The human leadership debated deep into the night. Some called it an obvious trap, while others argued that rejecting the offer could mean missing humanity's only chance at victory. In the end, desperation won out. The deal was made. The weapon arrives. A week later, the Zorathians delivered the weapon. A massive energy cannon, unlike anything human scientists had ever seen, was transported under heavy security to Earth's top research facility. Its sleek, obsidian frame pulsed faintly with blue light, giving off an eerie hum that resonated through the lab. Dr. Evelyn Park, one of Earth's leading weapons engineers, ran her fingers across its surface. "This is beyond anything we could have built ourselves," she murmured. "It's not just alien tech. It's something more." Her team immediately began disassembling and analyzing the weapon's structure. The technology was intricate but functional, its energy core drawing from an unknown source. After extensive testing, the scientists found no immediate flaws, no hidden self-destruct mechanisms, no apparent sabotage. It seemed too good to be true. And it was. Deployment on the battlefield. When the weapon was finally approved for combat, it was loaded onto the UES Vanguard, one of Earth's most formidable warships. Commander Sarah Kane, a decorated officer with years of battle experience, was given the honor of leading the first mission with the alien cannon. She had her doubts. The Zorathians had never shown mercy before, why start now? But orders were orders. The Vanguard, along with a fleet of Earth's best warships, engaged a heavily fortified Zorathian outpost orbiting the gas giant Kargas 7. The plan was simple: strike hard, strike fast, and use the cannon to obliterate enemy defenses before they could mount a counterattack. The tension was suffocating as the fleet approached the enemy stronghold. The Zorathians were waiting, their ships already forming attack patterns. The order was given. Fire the cannon. Silence. Sarah's heart pounded. The weapon, which had been humming with power just moments before, suddenly went dead. No energy surge. No response. "Systems failure, weapon is unresponsive," a technician yelled. Then, the enemy struck. The Zorathians had anticipated this. They had planned for this moment. Their ships surged forward, unleashing a devastating barrage of plasma fire. The Vanguard shook violently under the impact, shields failing as human warships scrambled to reposition. Panic spread through the fleet. The cannon, the weapon that was supposed to turn the tide, had failed at the most critical moment. Sarah clenched her fists, rage and frustration bubbling beneath the surface. They tricked us. And now, humanity was paying the price. Yet amid the chaos, as the Vanguard desperately maneuvered to avoid destruction, Sarah noticed something strange. The weapon, though inactive, was not entirely silent. A low, rhythmic hum emanated from its core, pulsing in sync with something unseen. A strange energy coursed beneath its surface, subtle but undeniable. Sarah's instincts screamed at her. The cannon wasn't dead. It was waking up. The battlefield was eerily quiet as Earth's forces prepared to deploy their new secret weapon. The Confederation of Zorith had been pressing hard, forcing the human military into a defensive stance. But today, everything was supposed to change. The new energy cannon, gifted, or rather, deceptively offered, by the Zorathians, was humanity's chance to turn the tide. Commander Sarah Kane stood at the frontline command post, her fingers tight around the hilt of her sidearm as she watched the cannon's final preparations. She had been fighting this war long enough to know when something didn't feel right. And this? This felt too convenient. But orders were orders. The Zorathians had presented the weapon as a gesture of peace, claiming that they wished to broker an armistice. In secret, human engineers had torn it apart, studied it, and found no apparent flaws. The technology was beyond anything humanity had ever built, and that alone was a reason for suspicion. Yet, desperate for an advantage, Earth's leaders had greenlit its use. Now, on a desolate planet deep in contested space, the moment of truth had arrived. Sarah signaled to the artillery crews. "Charge it up. Let's see what this thing can do." The weapon's sleek, alien casing hummed with energy as its core ignited. The air around it crackled, static electricity dancing through the dust and debris of the war-torn battlefield. Targeting computers locked onto the approaching Zorathian dreadnoughts, and the countdown began. 3. Across the human ranks, soldiers held their breath. 2. The Zorathian warships advanced, oblivious to the surprise awaiting them. 1. The cannon fired. Or rather, it tried to. The hum of power sputtered, flickering like a dying flame. The once mighty weapon that had promised salvation choked mid-discharge, and instead of a devastating beam of destruction, it let out a weak, pulsing whimper. Then, silence. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Zorathian forces wasted no time. Their ships unleashed a torrent of plasma fire, striking deep into the heart of the human formation. Soldiers scrambled for cover as explosions ripped through the defensive lines. What was supposed to be a moment of triumph had become a nightmare. Sarah gritted her teeth as she watched the cannon remain lifeless. "Damn it," she cursed, slamming her fist against the command panel. Over the radio, frantic voices filled the channel. "Commander, we're getting overrun. The cannon is useless. We need to retreat. Incoming. We need backup, now." Sarah's mind raced. This wasn't just a malfunction, it was sabotage. The Zorathians had played them. But something wasn't right. As Sarah turned back toward the weapon, she noticed a faint glow pulsing from its core. The energy wasn't gone. It was shifting. The Zorathians had sabotaged the weapon, but in doing so, had triggered something they didn't understand. A subtle, rhythmic hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Sarah's pulse quickened. "Get me a team on that weapon. Now." Whatever was happening, it wasn't over yet. Commander Sarah Kane and her team barely managed to retreat from the battlefield, the chaos of the failed attack still ringing in their ears. The human forces had been decimated, forced into a desperate withdrawal under heavy Zorathian fire. The so-called gifted weapon had failed them at the most crucial moment, and now Earth's forces were on the brink of collapse. But Sarah had seen something, felt something, just before they retreated. The energy cannon hadn't simply failed, it had changed. The weapon was alive in some way, humming with an eerie, rhythmic pulse that seemed almost aware. Now, hidden deep within an abandoned military outpost, Sarah and her team frantically worked to uncover what had gone wrong. Engineers and scientists swarmed the weapon, scanning its every component, desperate to understand why it had failed, and why it had begun to react in ways they couldn't explain. Lieutenant Grayson, a seasoned weapons specialist, wiped sweat from his forehead as he looked up from his data tablet. "Commander, I don't think this thing is broken," he said, his voice laced with uncertainty. "The energy is still there, but it's mutating." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Mutating? What do you mean?" Grayson hesitated. "The power source isn't just energy. It's adapting, like it's learning from us. The Zorathians sabotaged it, but whatever they did, it didn't just disable the weapon. It triggered something." Sarah stepped forward, placing a gloved hand on the cannon's smooth alien surface. The moment her fingers touched it, a sudden jolt ran through her body, as if the weapon recognized her presence. The hum grew louder, resonating in her bones. Something inside the cannon shifted. The panels along its exterior began to move, rearranging themselves with an almost organic fluidity. Lights flickered, and the air around it grew heavy with static charge. Then, the cannon spoke. Not in words, but in pure, raw emotion, a wave of thought and sensation that crashed into Sarah's mind. She stumbled back, gasping. Images flashed in her mind, vast starfields, ancient ruins, the rise and fall of civilizations long before humanity's first steps into space. The weapon wasn't just a piece of technology. It was alive. "Commander?" Grayson's voice broke through the haze. "Are you okay?" Sarah steadied herself, her breath shaky. "This isn't just some alien tech," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "It's something much older. Much more powerful." Her team exchanged uneasy glances. "So, what do we do with it?" one of the engineers asked. Sarah looked back at the weapon, its core now glowing with an intense blue light. The Zorathians had tried to deceive humanity, to cripple them with a faulty weapon. But they had unknowingly handed Earth something far greater. Something they had feared. Something that was waking up. And Sarah knew one thing for certain. The Zorathians had made a terrible mistake. Back on Earth, Sarah Kane and her team worked tirelessly inside a classified underground research facility. The captured weapon, the so-called defective energy cannon, was now their primary focus. Every scientist, engineer, and strategist available had been pulled into the effort to understand what they had unknowingly been given. The Zorathians thought they had sabotaged it. Instead, they had unlocked something beyond their comprehension. The weapon awakens. "Commander, look at this," Grayson called out, gesturing to the holographic display hovering above his workstation. Sarah stepped forward, rubbing exhaustion from her eyes. The entire lab was a mess of cables, energy readings, and half-written theories. "What are we looking at?" she asked. Grayson manipulated the hologram, zooming in on a simulated reconstruction of the weapon's core. "We assumed the Zorathians disabled it by interfering with the power regulators. But that's not what happened." He tapped a sequence of commands, and the image changed. The core pulsed with an intricate pattern of energy. "They tried to suppress it," he continued. "They were afraid of what this thing could become." Sarah exhaled sharply. It made sense. The Zorathians hadn't wanted to give humanity a powerful weapon. But they had underestimated human ingenuity. "What happens if we let it run at full capacity?" she asked. Grayson hesitated. "We don't know." Sarah looked at the weapon resting on the reinforced testing platform. Its surface, once smooth, had begun shifting, forming organic-like patterns of glowing energy lines. It wasn't just changing, it was adapting to them. "We're about to find out," she said. The first shot. The next phase of testing had to be conducted in a remote location, an abandoned lunar outpost, far from prying eyes. The Zorathians were still pressing their advantage in battle, unaware that their supposed trickery had backfired. Standing in the sealed test chamber, Sarah and Grayson observed the weapon, now mounted on an automated targeting rig. Powering up, Grayson announced. Core is stable. Charging sequence initiated. The hum returned. But this time, it was different. It was stronger. Target locked, the AI system confirmed. Fire, Sarah commanded. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then, a brilliant column of energy erupted from the cannon, not in a chaotic blast, but in a smooth, controlled beam of pure destruction. It struck the designated target, a decommissioned warship in lunar orbit. The ship didn't explode. It ceased to exist. The beam tore through the vessel at the molecular level, disassembling it into particles of glowing dust. No debris. No wreckage. Just, gone. Silence filled the chamber. Grayson's voice was barely a whisper. That wasn't just an energy weapon. That was something else. Sarah clenched her fists. And the Zorathians have no idea we've unlocked it. The battlefield turns. Earth's forces had been on the defensive for weeks. Zorathian warships patrolled occupied human colonies, confident in their impending victory. Then, everything changed. The first counterattack came swift and brutal. Zorathian ships that once seemed invincible were annihilated with pinpoint accuracy. Their shields, their defenses, none of it mattered. The new weapon was unlike anything ever seen. The Confederation's high command scrambled for answers. How had the humans turned the tide so suddenly? Deep in their war chambers, Zorathian generals watched in horror as battle reports flooded in. This isn't possible, one growled. We sabotaged that weapon. It should not work. Another officer, reviewing the footage of a recent engagement, paled. It's not just working. It's evolving. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were winning. Sarah Kane stood on the bridge of her command ship, watching as the stars burned bright with the light of the impossible. The Zorathians had thought they could deceive humanity. Now, they were about to learn the real truth. And this time, Earth was the one holding the weapon. The Zorathians were no strangers to war. They had crushed countless civilizations, subjugated entire species, and erased history that did not serve their empire. But this was different. This was fear. Their fleet commanders, once arrogant and dismissive of human resistance, now watched in stunned disbelief as their mighty warships vanished without a trace. No wreckage. No survivors. Just a void where once there had been an unstoppable invasion force. What had they done? The last stand becomes a reckoning. Deep in the void of space, a lone human warship, the USS Resolute, drifted near an asteroid belt, waiting. Sarah Kane stood at the command console, watching sensor feeds as the massive Zorathian fleet approached. They had come for revenge. Contacts confirmed, tactical reported. 2 battleships, 8 cruisers, and several squadrons of fighter escorts. They think we're weak. Sarah smirked. Let's remind them why they're wrong. The Resolute had once been a sturdy but outdated battleship, no match for a Zorathian fleet. But now? Now, it carried the weapon. Charge the core, she ordered. A low hum filled the ship as the weapon prepared to fire. The lights flickered slightly, and the reinforced energy conduits pulsed with an eerie glow. The Zorathians opened fire first. Plasma torpedoes screamed across the void, streaks of burning energy seeking to rip the Resolute apart. Shields holding, Grayson confirmed, his voice tense. But not for long. Sarah's gaze remained locked on the enemy fleet. Return fire. A single pulse of energy shot from the ship's modified weapon. Not a blast. Not a missile. Just a flicker of light that seemed almost harmless, until it reached its target. The lead Zorathian battleship ceased to exist. No explosion. No debris. Just, gone. For the first time in recorded history, the Zorathians hesitated. And Sarah pressed the advantage. Fire at will. The void of space became a graveyard. Zorathian High Command in chaos. This cannot be happening. Supreme Commander Jorvok slammed his fist against the war table, his claws scraping against the metal surface. They were supposed to be primitive. Weak. The other commanders remained silent. They had no answers. A low-ranking officer hesitated before speaking. The humans, they have turned our sabotage against us. We gave them the weapon, thinking it was broken, but they have. Enough. Jorvok roared. His mandibles clicked in frustration as he stared at the battle reports. Ship after ship was vanishing. The humans were wiping out entire fleets with pinpoint precision. Jorvok's second-in-command, a grizzled warrior named Voranake, leaned in. We have underestimated them. Jorvok sneered. Then we will destroy them before they can spread further. With what fleet? Voranake growled. Look at the reports. They are hunting us now. Jorvok's face contorted into something that no Zorathian had ever experienced before. Dread. The hunt begins. Sarah Kane stood on the observation deck of her flagship, watching the ruins of what had once been an invincible armada. The Zorathians had thought themselves gods. They had believed humanity was nothing more than a passing nuisance. Now, they were running. And Earth was coming for them. Sarah turned to her crew, eyes sharp and unwavering. Set course for their homeworld. The war was no longer about survival. Now, it was about payback. The Zorathian homeworld, Dravkor, had never known war. It was a fortress world, shielded by layers of defenses, hidden behind the might of the greatest fleet in the galaxy. For centuries, it had stood untouchable, an impenetrable citadel where the High Command ruled with absolute authority. But now, for the first time in history, Dravkor was vulnerable. The humans were coming. The ultimate defense. From orbit, Dravkor looked like a glowing jewel, its surface covered in sprawling cities, immense military complexes, and towering fortresses. Surrounding it was the last remnant of the Zorathian fleet, 3 massive warships, each the size of a small moon, along with hundreds of smaller vessels, all bracing for humanity's arrival. In the Zorathian war chamber, Supreme Commander Jorvok paced in frustration, his claws clacking against the polished floor. Have the planetary defenses been activated? Yes, Supreme Commander, a technician confirmed. The orbital cannons are online. The fleet is prepared for a last stand. Jorvok bared his fangs. We should never have given them that cursed weapon. It has turned them into something unnatural. His second-in-command, Voranake, let out a low growl. Then we will end this before they have a chance to strike. But deep down, they both knew, it was already too late. Earth's arrival. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm of vengeance. Thousands of ships, frigates, battleships, carriers, all arranged in perfect formation. And at the heart of the fleet was the resolute, Sarah Kane's flagship, now fused with the terrifying power of the modified weapon. Sarah stood at the bridge, her hands gripping the armrests of her command chair. The energy coursing through the ship pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The weapon was no longer just a tool, it was an extension of her will. Commander, enemy fleet detected, Grayson reported. They're holding defensive formations around Dravkor. Sarah took a deep breath. She could feel the weapon urging her forward, whispering to her, feeding her visions of destruction. The Zorathians had tormented her people, burned human colonies, slaughtered millions. And now, she had the power to erase them in an instant. Target their lead warship, she ordered. A pulse of energy rippled through the Resolute's hull. The weapon was eager. Hungry. The crew could feel it, an unnatural pressure in the air, as if reality itself was bending under its power. Fire. A single bolt of energy shot forward. The Zorathian flagship vanished. No explosion. No wreckage. Just nothing. A ripple of fear spread through the enemy fleet. Some ships turned to flee. Others hesitated, waiting for orders that would never come. Sarah watched them, her fingers tightening on the armrest. The whispers of the weapon grew louder. Destroy them all. Leave nothing. Avenge humanity. The power was intoxicating. But deep inside, a thought gnawed at her. If she continued, if she unleashed the full power of the weapon, would humanity win the war, or would they become something worse than the Zorathians? A desperate gamble. The Zorathians, realizing they were outmatched, deployed their ultimate weapon, a colossal, sentient warship known as the Doomforged, a vessel designed to consume the energy of entire planets. It dwarfed even the largest human battleships, its surface bristling with weaponry. Its core pulsed with an eerie blue light, powered by an artificial intelligence far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. A deep, rumbling voice echoed through the human comm channels. I am Doomforged. I am eternal. Submit or be erased. The ship's main cannon began to charge. Sarah's eyes narrowed. She could feel the weapon reacting, its power growing in response to the challenge. The final battle had begun. The power within. The human fleet surged forward, unleashing everything they had. Missile barrages, railgun fire, beams of plasma, it was a storm of firepower unlike anything seen before. But the Doomforged was a monster. It absorbed the attacks, its core burning brighter as it fed on the energy. Then, in a single pulse, it released a shockwave that obliterated an entire squadron of human ships in one instant. The bridge of the Resolute shook violently. Alarms blared. The crew struggled to keep control. Sarah felt the whispers of the weapon again, louder this time. More. Give me more. Release me. She clenched her jaw. She had to decide, fight like a soldier, or become something else entirely. She closed her eyes and made her choice. Divert all power to the weapon. Commander, that could overload the... Do it. The ship shuddered as energy surged into the weapon. The glow from its core became blinding. Sarah could feel it bonding with her, sinking to her very thoughts. The Doomforged fired its superweapon. Sarah caught the blast with her mind. The crew gasped as the energy from the enemy's weapon bent, twisted, and reversed direction, back toward the Doomforged. The monstrous warship, which had thought itself invincible, was now facing the full force of its own power. Sarah's eyes glowed as she whispered, "Burn." The Doomforged imploded. A silent scream echoed through space as the warship collapsed into a singularity, its own energy consuming it from within. And then, just like that, it was gone. The aftermath. Silence filled the void. The remaining Zorathian ships, leaderless and broken, surrendered. Some fled. Others powered down their weapons, their crews paralyzed by what they had witnessed. Sarah Kane stood on the bridge, breathing heavily. The weapon had been right. The power had been enough. But she had won on her terms. Not as a conqueror. Not as a destroyer. But as a human. She exhaled slowly. Open a channel to Dravkor. Let's talk. The war was over. But the future was just beginning. The once invincible Zorathian Empire now stood at the mercy of humanity. Their war fleets were gone, their ultimate weapon annihilated, and their homeworld Dravkor was defenseless for the first time in history. Sarah Kane, standing on the bridge of the Resolute, watched the flickering comms screen where Supreme Commander Jorvok appeared. The Zorathian leader's posture was tense, his mandibles clicking in controlled fury. "We accept your terms," Jorvok said at last. The words were bitter, spoken through gritted fangs. Dravkor surrenders to humanity. The Resolute's crew erupted into cheers, but Sarah raised a hand. The battle was over, but the war's true test was just beginning. She had not fought just for vengeance. She had fought for something greater. "Let's talk," she said. Jorvok's reptilian eyes narrowed. "Talk?" Sarah leaned forward. "You don't realize it yet, Jorvok, but this is your only chance to survive. The Broken Empire." Sarah, escorted by an elite human security team, stepped onto Zorathian soil for the first time. The towering spires of Dravkor's capital city, once symbols of strength, now loomed like silent sentinels over a broken empire. The streets were filled with fearful citizens, their scales shifting in nervous patterns. They had believed in their empire's dominance, in the stories of Zorathian superiority passed down for centuries. But now? They had seen their war fleets erased in an instant. They had watched as the great Doomforged was consumed by its own arrogance. And standing before them was a human, the woman who had brought the empire to its knees. Sarah could feel the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. Humanity had the power to erase the Zorathians completely. But should they? She turned to Jorvok. "You wanted war. Now you have peace. But it's on our terms." The Supreme Commander's tail flicked behind him. "What do you want, human?" She looked around at the Zorathian soldiers, the civilians watching from the shadows. "I want a future where our people never have to do this again." Jorvok scoffed. "Spare us your morality. What are your demands?" Sarah's lips pressed into a firm line. "Unconditional surrender. The Zorathian military is to be dismantled. Your fleet will be placed under human oversight. No more warships, no more planetary defenses. You will never again threaten another species." Jorvok bared his fangs. "You mean to enslave us?" "No," Sarah said, shaking her head. "I mean to save you." The Supreme Commander's mandibles twitched in disbelief. Sarah folded her arms. "Your empire was built on war. Without it, you will collapse. If humanity walks away today, you'll fall into civil war within months. Your rivals, your conquered species, they will tear you apart." Jorvok growled but said nothing. He knew she was right. "That's why we're offering something else," Sarah continued. "Integration. We won't just tear down your empire, we'll help you build something better." Jorvok's reptilian eyes flickered with confusion. "You offer aid? After all we've done?" Sarah's voice was steady. "Because the alternative is extinction. And we refuse to become conquerors. We are human. We don't destroy, we rebuild." Silence hung between them. And then, for the first time in history, a Supreme Commander of the Zorathians lowered his head in submission to a human. "The future begins." Over the next few months, the Zorathian military was dismantled. Human forces occupied key strategic locations, not as overlords, but as peacekeepers. The newly formed Galactic Accord, led by humanity, began integrating Zorathian technology and knowledge into a new age of cooperation. But not everyone accepted peace so easily. There were whispers of rebellion, of Zorathian warlords refusing to bow. There were factions within humanity who saw this as weakness, who demanded total control. And in the shadows, a new threat was beginning to stir, one far more dangerous than the Zorathian war machine had ever been. Sarah Kane had won the war. But peace? Peace would be the real battle.